Oliver Hardy, one half of the famous comedy team of Laurel and Hardy, really looked perplexed.
One image from 1956 startled Oliver Hardy. Previously weighed 300 pounds. Of comic gold appeared to be a specter of no one realized that he had dropped about 100. No one was aware of how ill he actually was. The studio remained silent about it, while still marketing his movies behind that well-known a man with a mustache and a tie twiddling battling for his life in this uncommon picture ultimately discloses what Hollywood attempted to conceal the latter days of the cherished stars. January 18th was Oliver Hardy's birthday. In a little Georgian town in 1892, his father having made it through one of the most brutal Civil War battles, but only 10. Oliver passed just a few months after his birth. Oliver never had a heart attack. Truly know him and his mother before bringing up kids from a prior boarding was left to be handled by marriage. Homes around Georgia simply to maintain the family moving frequently, and while they were small Oliver watched his mother work as a child. Difficult to endure, that initial instability never abandoned him, even when Oliver was a youngster. Something unique at the age of 8. Was a youngster who performed all throughout the South. He was a soprano who truly had a gift for music. His mother sent him to train in Atlanta with Oliver wasn't the best vocal coach, but nevertheless typed to sit in a class that he didn't attend taught, and performed in theaters for $3.50 a week was a respectable sum. He even fled from school back then. To participate in a touring show that displays courage, it was always necessary to be on stage. In him, and it persisted throughout school. He was taken to a place where he never belonged. Discipline-focused military school, followed by a college in the highlands of Georgia, but he had little interest in studying. Favorite neighborhood theater accepting any opportunity to play at age 20. He signed up for studying law at the University of Georgia, but not because he was a bookworm. He never missed a football game. But most likely never opened a textbook. But the self-assurance he acquired followed him for the rest of his life on that field. By Oliver was employed in a small town in 1910. Theater taking care of everything, including cleaning to operate the projector. However, all those he became enraged after spending hours watching movies. He began to think he could perform superior to those on film. Hence, he relocated to Jacksonville, Florida, in 1913, which has more than 30 films at the time. Studios. It was the equivalent of Hollywood. He worked at a movie theater throughout the day. At night, he performed at clubs under Ton of Jolly as a reference to as he met Meline, a musician, in the 300B frame. Solosian, who earned 7 times the amount of money, as he married her in the same year. Despite his mother's disapproval, Oliver made his cinematic debut in 1914 in Outwitting Dad, a short film, is attributed with Owen Hardy, due to his height of 6 feet 1 inch. At about 300 pounds, he was consistently portrayed as by 1915, the villain, the heavy, had starred in 50 short films, and he frequently portrayed the villain pursuing the skinny hero, but those slapstick parts in the beginning instructed him in the use of his. He even got a job because of his comical looks. To mimic a different performer, who was already mimicking the sidekick of Charlie Chaplin, was ridiculous. Yet it covered the expenses for Oliver's brief period from 1916 to 1917, moved behind the lens, and gave instructions. He appeared in 10 movies as well. He learned from his brief experience as a filmmaker how to construct a joke, how to examine the audience, and the timing of each move. He also revealed the studio's corruption where he was employed, and found that the owners were embezzling money from payroll. Soon after, the business failed, although he didn't quit his job. He simply relocated to a different studio and continued. Oliver's Melane's marriage began well, and they played in the same locations and even had as pets a dog and a monkey. But when they relocated to Los Angeles in 1917 was a pivotal year in his career. And his curiosity for other. By 1919, Melanie had brought him to the court as requesting $30 per week in assistance. He frequently failed to make payments when her father became ill, so she bravely went to see him, pledged to make things right. So he sent her a telegram stating that he would not accept her back, which was the last thing. Hardy attempted to join the military during World War I, but his size made the recruiters laugh. Nevertheless, he continued to labor. In 1921, occurred on TV, but nobody gave any attention, given consideration at the moment, but would subsequently turn into a silent comedy short that is historic. The Lucky Dog, which was published on December 1st. A young man by the name of Stan Laurel portrayed a destitute vagrant who, after being expelled from his house, he finds a stray dog, and they end up becoming pals. And another man named Oliver. In the same movie, Hardy appears as an awkward criminal who attempts to rob someone before joining forces, blowing Laurel off with a jealous boyfriend, Dynamite. But the strategy doesn't work because he is saved by the small dog. Seems like a rehashed comedy. Brief, but the twist is that this was the Laurel and Hardy's initial appearance on screen together, but no one was aware of it yet. They would eventually emerge as one of the finest comic duos ever. Still, they weren't even pals at the time. Were just two men in the same movie, performing several scenes. Laurel was crazy. Although vivacious, Hardy appeared tough, and warning that it will take another 7 years for someone to realize how well they could work together, as that single little film remained on the shelves 2 years prior to his release. Hardy was already establishing a reputation for himself. From 1918 to 1923, he appeared in more 40 Vitagraph Studios silent films. He tended to play the villain most of the time. At the time, Larry Seaman was his partner, a comedian who enjoyed outrageous acts, explosions, and untidy mayhem. In their movies were pricey, packed with exciting action, and usually it ended in devastation. Donned artificial mustaches and heavy eyebrows to appear more cruel, yet his personal life was deteriorating as he grew. Split up a week later on November 1921. Hardy married after divorcing his first wife, actress Myrtle Reeves. Nonetheless, they hardly shared anything in common. Put in a lot of work and spent his leisure spending time at casinos and racetracks. She remained at home and began drinking in 1926. Heavy. Hardy attempted to assist in placing her, receiving treated in a sanitarium, but she continued to flee to get a drink. Once, she disappeared for 6 weeks with $35,000 in cash, which Hardy claimed he looked for. They broke up and searched everywhere for her. Got back together repeatedly, perhaps even after 8 or 10 attempts. They didn't formally separated until Hardy's 16-year chaos in 1937 professional life, but continued to move. He went on to play the Tin Man in 1925, The Wizard of Oz in silent form under Larry Seaman's direction. This wasn't the people are aware of the musical version today, which was slapstick-filled black and white. Seaman's real life was used to portray Dorothy. Fiancé Hardy began working on farms, and eventually became into the Tin Man once critics were split when they arrived in Oz. But according to one magazine, it would make the world's largest grouch laugh. In retrospect, this movie revealed something important: Hardy's expressions on his face. It was all about timing his movements. He was becoming more than just a background antagonist. In the same year that he partnered with a different comic named, they produced 4 comedic shorts with Bobby Ray. They played wallpaper together in one. Hangars in another hotel sanitarium. What makes Bellhops a disaster? What makes these movies unique is how much they like Hardy and Laurel. But without Laurel, Hardy was the astute one. Ray, the awkward companion, was the one in charge. Although the parts were well known, something critics claimed that Ray just didn't. He wasn't as humorous, and later on, the synergy wasn't there. Acknowledge that. I was the smart man, exactly like I'm the only one with Laurel. The Fall Man also tells it all. The recipe was nearly complete. It only needed the man next to him. Is Oliver Hardy had completed around 250 films. Prior to the majority of people even knowing his name, he was employed at Hal Roach Studios in 1924, playing little yet significant roles, and he wasn't yet a star in short comedies. But at the same time as he stood out, another Stan Laurel, a comedian, appeared at the studio. They weren't employed together, occurred to be present at the same time. But destiny has an odd way of. In 1926, Hardy was working when he torched his Stan's arm while preparing a piece of lamb. Was requested to replace him in one of the short flicks. As soon as they were shown, something clicked together, but it wasn't pushed. It just worked. It wasn't planned. There was more laughter because of the chemistry. In 1927, the studio made the decision to turn them into a true team for the first time. Putting Pants was their official joint film. It wasn't the Laurel and Philip. Today, we know Hardy from that movie. Stan played a kilted, wild Scotsman and the stiff uncle. Hardy was attempting to put him in pants. That was a foolish and audacious move, and a hit, which demonstrated their skill off one another, one being the idiot and the other the audiences of the irate straight men adored the contrast as soon as they appeared. The Battle of the Century with Fire, released in 1927, they put on a performance of still regarded as the largest pie fight. It began with a boxing match in movie history. And it concluded with pies flying everywhere. The Neighborhood and Leave Them Laughing, which was published in 1928. Stan receives a pain that turns into laughing gas. The remainder of the movie is chaotic. These weren't crashes, cops, and giggles. Only slapstick shorts were made, orchestrated and filled with tangible humor that nobody else was attempting at that level at this time. Hardy additionally began molding his personality. He was just the large guy who fell. The arrogant man who made an effort to stay dignity only to be humiliated in the end. Trademark gesture. The twiddle of the knot started to seem to tamper with his tie. When feeling ashamed, he would look directly into the camera with an expression like, "Can you think this?" It was easy, yet dazzling. Audiences thought he was speaking to them directly. Followed by The Talkies were the major shift sound in 1929. Eradicating silent film stars and true. But Hardy flourished in his first Stan sound picture was unusual, since the title was even a joke regarding Hardy's Southern was ultimately spoken by them. Draw he learned from his early years in Georgia echoed his haughty on-screen persona. He spoke gently and with excellent character, plainly, and with a somewhat phony significance that added humor to each line. Additionally, that's when the catchphrases began. In Hardy, the first sound movie, remarked with a sigh, "Why don't you do something to assist me?" And that became his preferred. In a subsequent fine mess from he gave the now famous, speech in 1930. Here's another lovely mess that you have. He didn't only recite the lines. He used pauses, looks, and that to sell them. irritated voice that persisted kind even when enraged by the prizes in 1932, they went on to win the first ever Best Live-Action Short at the Academy Awards comedy for the entire movie. The music box involves transporting a piano up a massive only a set of stairs, but the time, difficulty, and annoyance was hilarious, and they really broke 7. Critics quarreled over pianos during filming regarding it, but history sided with the movie's staircases still have a by that time. The plaque in Los Angeles was so well liked that short movies weren't sufficient. They entered features with the prison comedy Pardon Us began originally a 20-inch parody, but evolved into the production was a full-length film. Messy, including more than a year's worth of battle with MGM and required re-editing. Following negative previews, yet they persisted even if they recorded it in 4 Spanish, French, German, and more languages, and the lines being recited in Italian phonetically without knowing what they claimed that no one else was taking action. That the roles behind the scenes where he wrote that the engine was clear Laurel. Directed, edited, and consumed by each and every joke. Hardy just arrived and did a fantastic job. Played golf at home after the performance or Cook didn't mind, considering everything. The amusing things he once stated. There was plenty of time for him to play golf. He was letting Stan do what because he was lazy. He provided his utmost effort in exchange for faultless performances that brought the thoughts on life from 1929 to 1935. They produced 5 full-length films and 40 shorts. It was an incredible run, and during it all Hardy was the man who kept everything calm during the storm. He remained motionless as everything around in 1933, Laurel and Hardy dissolved. Released a movie that many people still think didn't have their best Sons of the Desert. Occur in the desert with nothing to do with wars abroad, but it was concerning 2 husbands attempting to elude detection from their spouses to a lodge convention. The movie was hilarious enough that even the crew and director were unable to halt while filming. They had to chuckle. Repeatedly reshoot scenes in one made Bush's iconic moment of smashing a vase above Hardy's head as he exhaled. That scene turned into a classic with a huge chuckle. Despite the Great Depression, the movie touched a nerve that people had to laugh, and this film provided them just that. Remained on television for decades, subsequently appearing on Turner Classic Films as late as 2005. The combination of ideal timing, bold performances, and witty jokes made in 1937. For years later, they went out west, and no one anticipated Oliver. It was difficult to sing, but he did. His baritone voice, however, astounded me. Visitors Across the Trail of the song, Lonesome Pine, wasn't brand new. Published in 1913, but Hardy's adaptation became the person that everyone thought of first. Stan Laurel interrupting with an exaggerated balance. The performance's perception of both Hardy had studied, and was hilarious and touching. Music at a younger age, but this was one of the few occasions that folks were able to hear his abilities provided admirers with a fresh despite all the laughter. There is respect for him. Was an off-screen individual with genuine talent. When Hardy was in pain in 1937, Myrtle Reeves, his 16-year-old wife, was divorced. They were married in 1921. And was heartbreaking. Myrtle battled sadness and alcoholism, and Hardy made every effort to assist her. He spent more than $40,000 on her care. Greater than today, he sent her to $800,000. Repeatedly in the hopes that she would get better, but nothing worked, friends. stated that Hardy would return home after a long day spent on set just to discover turmoil in store. He never allowed it to show in his work. But even in those gloomy times, he provided spectators with some of his most brilliant performances. At the time of the divorce in November, Hardy was finalized. Devastated but simultaneously liberated at that moment, something lovely was taking place. Laurel lived in Britain from 1935 to 1940, and Hardy were rising to fame on a worldwide scale. Once silent, their film suddenly of sound. However, that didn't deter fans abroad. If anything, that increased their affection for the pair. In 1932, they reached Southampton. More than 5,000 supporters were there for their UK tour, awaiting their sold-out gigs at the dock. British newspapers referred to it as "in hours." Hardy mania. Hardy and Laurel enchanted the press by declaring, "We're only two guys," attempting to make them laugh as much as possible. Sons of the Desert did, in reality, earn more in the United Kingdom than in. Despite having fewer theaters, America, they pushed back in Hollywood thanks to their celebrity. When the number of studio deals was increasing challenging, therefore in 1939, they created the film Flying Deuces. Was shot in just 22 days, with a spending limit of $375,000. But the thing that truly altered Hardy's, who he met, was more important in life than the movie. The actress Lucille Jones was a Hardy. A 29-year-old writing girl was 47. They connected despite their different ages. He began adding extra takes right away, scenarios, only to have more time with her. On March 8, 1940, a few months later, their marriage was placed in Las Vegas. Stan. This was Hardy's best man, Laurel. His first genuine love. Despite his third marriage, Virginia provided him with the security he'd gone for years. They remained together till his passing, and friends claimed that she grounded him in 1957. Serene and content in a manner that no one else ever. Even during those years of calm, Hardy had secrets, and his appetite was one of them. He claimed not to eat much, yet that wasn't accurate. His preferred dish was 32-ounce steak, potatoes fried, and make a whole pot of coffee and a salad. The type of food that maintained him round and ideal for his position next to Laurel was slender. Yet that size came at. Hardy suffered a heart attack in 1954. Physicians advised him to lose weight quickly. Shed more than 150 pounds, according to some due to cancer, although that was never verified. The weight loss in any case. Fans were stunned too.